Section 7, the Olivet Discourse. There was a day in the life of Christ that he walked out of the temple in Jerusalem toward the Mount of Olives, and his 12 apostles followed him. When he arrived at the Mount of Olives, he apparently sat down by himself because the Bible points out that 4 of his apostles came up to him privately. They were the apostles Peter and his brother Andrew, James the son of Zebedee, and his brother John, and they asked him, "What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" The answer that Jesus gave them constitutes the second longest discourse that Jesus Christ spoke on anything in the Gospels. It is second only to the great Sermon on the Mount. It identifies the major signs and wonders over a 7-year period that lead up to and include the second coming of Christ at the end of this tribulation period and the kingdom that immediately follows. It is praised not just for its prophetic content, but also for its chronology. It is the Rosetta Stone for understanding other prophecies on this prophetic period of time, regardless of where they are mentioned elsewhere in the Bible as to when they will occur by mapping them against the chronology of the Olivet Discourse. The Lord's immediate answer to what the 4 apostles asked initiates the Olivet Discourse with events that Christ labeled as the beginning of sorrows. And Jesus answered and said unto them, "Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For a nation shall rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilence, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." The very first things prophesied by Jesus in the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, verses 4 through 8, are indeed the very first things that will occur in the beginning of the 7-year tribulation period. Now, some may be thinking, previously, for thousands of years, we've had false Christ, wars, famines, pestilence, and earthquakes. How can you say that these things are the very things to occur within the 7-year tribulation period? The answer lies in how Christ collectively characterizes them. All these are the beginning of sorrows. The term is analogous to the beginning of birth pangs that a pregnant woman experiences when she goes into labor. Usually, although a woman may in the 6th month of her pregnancy start to experience contractions, that does not mean that she's going into labor. She also will continue to experience contractions in the 7th and 8th months of her pregnancy, but she still hasn't gone into labor. But when she goes into labor in her 9th month, she gets contractions also, but now they are becoming more regular in timing between each contraction, and they start to become more intense and last longer in duration. So what can we simply surmise from this analogy for the beginning of sorrows in this biblical text is that whereas we have previously had false Christ, wars, famines, pestilence, and earthquakes, just like a woman in pregnancy has had contractions months before she went into labor, when we see these beginning of sorrows occurring more often, more intensely, and lasting longer in duration, it will signal to us who know better that just as much as a woman who goes into labor recognizes that her pregnancy is about to end with the birth of her child, that is just as much as we will know this world system that's been existing for thousands of years under the influence of the spirit of the power of the air of the devil is coming to an end and will result in the birth of the kingdom. Let's press into trying to understand these beginning of sorrows more. And Jesus answered and said unto them, "Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many." Notice that what appears first in the beginning of sorrows are that many false Christs are on the prowl. Is there any other place in the Bible that substantiates this sorrow occurring first? Yes, there is. Most commentators believe that in the book of Revelation, information about the tribulation period begins in chapter 6. "And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Some may think that the writer is Christ, but Jesus in chapter 5 is found in heaven giving a book with 7 seals that no one but he is worthy to open. Plus, it is too soon for Jesus to be returning to earth as he does later on a white horse in Revelation 19. However, the rider of this white horse in these verses resembles Christ, which is indicative of the counterfeiting characteristics of the Antichrist, but he is very different. It says that he is given a crown indicating that he is a king, whereas Christ, when he returns, is referred to as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The Antichrist comes into power apparently by peaceable means, a bow, but no arrows, which lead men to damnation, whereas Jesus uses the word of life, the Bible as a sword, which affects eternal life. There's a third scriptural text in Daniel 27, which also confirms that the Antichrist is in view at the very beginning of the tribulation period, and therefore complements the prophetic information provided in both the first sorrow in the Olivet Discourse and the first seal in the book of Revelation. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Within the context of a proper study of the 70 weeks of Daniel, this verse indicates that the prince, the Antichrist, who will come, shall confirm the covenant with many, the nation of Israel, for 1 week, for a period of 7 years, at the very beginning of the 7-year tribulation period. The terms of this agreement are not clear, but apparently the Antichrist will pledge his support for Israel's existence, security, and peace. Also, this text infers that in the prophetic future, Israel will rebuild the sanctuary, its temple, and offer sacrifices. In short, the first sorrow of the beginning of sorrows in Matthew 24 speak of false Christ in general, while the first seal in Revelation chapter 6 and the 70th week in Daniel chapter 9 talk about the Antichrist in particular. 3 different passages of scripture written by 3 different authors at 3 separate times, but one unifying theme. At the beginning of the tribulation period, false Christ, of which the Antichrist is one, will be on the prowl. Keep in mind that at the very beginning of the tribulation period, the Antichrist appears as one of many false Christ. However, it is not until the middle of the tribulation that he is revealed or claims deity and receives deity worship. The next sorrow, the beginning of sorrows, speaks of wars. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. It's interesting that the next and second seal in the book of Revelation also talks about war. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, Come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. Next, the third sorrow identifies famines. And there shall be famines, Matthew 24:7c. A measure of wheat for a penny actually means a loaf of bread for a day's wages, because a denarius, referred to as a penny in Bible times, represented the average wage a worker received for a day's work. To put this in perspective, within our generation of time, the average wage that a worker makes for one day's wages is about $250 a day. Can you imagine going into a supermarket and a single loaf of bread costs $250? That's about 100 times more than what a loaf of bread would typically cost. If everything else you wanted to purchase in the grocery store that day cost 100 times more than what it does normally, then you would only be able to buy precious little, and no doubt not enough to feed you and yours. That's famine. The fourth seal gives us the next insight as far as what occurs next. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. The fourth seal results in death in general. The first things mentioned that contribute to 1/4 of the earth dying are due to ongoing wars and ongoing famines, which are the second and third sorrows. Another factor contributing to this massive amount of death is due to beast of the earth. What does that mean? In the days of Moses, before the children of Israel came into the promised land, God told them in Exodus 23 verses 28 through 30 that he would beforehand send hornets to drive out certain peoples such as the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites from the land of promise. However, God would not do so within a period of 1 year, lest the beast of the field multiply too much, but he would do so a little at a time until the people of Israel increased when inheriting the land. But prophetically, in the tribulation period, when so much human death is occurring, it will result in beasts of the earth multiplying too much, and it will become a threat to human beings as predators. Other factors contributing to this death are revealed in the fourth sorrow. There shall be pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. In summary so far, both the Olivet Discourse and the book of Revelation each speak of these 4 categories of sorrow in the same sequence. But one needs to understand also, as we press further into the Olivet Discourse, is that we do not just have these sorrows happening within sequence. The Olivet Discourse spoken by Christ provides us with something much more valuable than a simple chronology. It provides us with a cause and effect chronology. That is to say that one previous sorrow becomes the cause that results in, or at a bare minimum contributes to, the next effect, which is the next sorrow. The first sorrow occurs first. Consider that if there are many false Christs, each claiming that they are the way, it is not difficult to envision devout followers of one false Christ getting into heated situations with devout followers of another false Christ. Some of these false Christs may have an enormous following on a national or regional level. The Arab culture is waiting for a Khalifa. Israel, as a nation, in that it did not accept Jesus Christ as their Messiah, is still waiting for another Messiah. Some hold that Israel accepts the Antichrist as that other Messiah when he signs a covenant with them at the beginning of the tribulation period to ensure Israel's peace and safety. The point is that there are many false Christs in view at the very start of the tribulation period, and to some measure they collectively will be a cause that leads to the effect of wars and rumors of wars. The first sorrow is a cause that affects the second sorrow. If nothing else, false Christs lead people into spiritual darkness, which is devoid of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. Lacking these virtues creates an atmosphere that is ripe for wars. The second sorrow is a cause that affects the third sorrow. Wars in turn now become the cause that lead to the next effect, which are famines. Historically, famines usually follow wars, and this will be true during the prophetic future when the frequency and magnitude of some of these wars occur, especially the kingdom versus kingdom type warfare. Primarily, the second and third sorrows together are the cause that affects the fourth sorrow. As a result of ongoing wars and famines comes much death in general, which includes pestilences, which typically follow such things, and they are joined by other catastrophic activities such as earthquakes and beasts of the earth that also will contribute to the sorrow of 1/4 of the earth becoming deceased. Collectively, these beginning of sorrows are the cause that will affect a bitter emotional resentment or disbelief in a loving God, and subsequently a hatred for those naming the name of Christ, who are propagating the love of the gospel and are trying to be salt to a world gone mad. Which leads us to the fifth sorrow in the sequence that both the Olivet Discourse and the book of Revelation indicate, which is persecution. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Starts with the word then, T-H-E-N. Immediately after the beginning of sorrows, then this persecution occurs. It is not part of the beginning of sorrows, but it follows them within the first half, or within the first 3.5 years of the seven-year tribulation period. Also, this persecution is impacting those who are naming the name of Christ, meaning that they are Christian believers. Unfortunately, some speculate that the entire Olivet Discourse is referring to Israel. However, Israel from the 1st century AD to today, and even to this future prophetic point in time, will not be representing the name of Christ. Israel does not know its true Messiah until they see Jesus Christ returning at the end of the tribulation period to gather them back into the Holy Land to fulfill the promises made to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Besides, as we shall see, Israel's persecution does not come until the Antichrist breaks his covenant with them in the middle of the tribulation period, meaning that Israel's persecution occurs in the last half of the tribulation period. The Antichrist makes and keeps a covenant with Israel during the entire first half of the tribulation period, when his persecution of Christian believers occurs. Also, when it says that all nations will be hating those naming the name of Christ, it does not mean that every person in the world will be hating Christianity, but rather that at the national level, through political and or religious leaders, some of whom may be false Christ, will enact laws and spew out rhetoric denouncing Christianity. It will result in a great persecution of believers, with some being betrayed even by family members and others becoming martyred. Jesus reveals this, and so does the next seal in the book of Revelation. And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? A great many Christians reading about the martyred saints in Seal 5 and Revelation 6 never make the connection that these deceased martyred souls here in this text are the very saints that Jesus predicted would get martyred in the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24. In Luke's account of the Olivet Discourse, Jesus said in chapter 21, verse 16, And some of you shall they cause to be put to death. These here in Revelation 6, 9, and 10 are those martyrs. Take heart, however, because when Jesus, during his public ministry here on earth, sent out his disciples 2 by 2 to evangelize, one of his instructions was that if his disciples started to suspect or see persecution breaking out, that they were to flee. If Joseph in Egypt was given 7 years to prepare for a famine, and Noah 120 years to prepare for a flood, we've been given 2,000 years to prepare to avoid a lot of things during the tribulation period, including this great persecution. There's nothing wrong or shameful about that, and as a matter of fact, historically, persecution has never resulted in eradication of Christianity, but rather multiplication of Christianity. Just as much as the early church in the 1st century suffered a massive persecution as recorded in the book of Acts, which resulted in the gospel spreading from Jerusalem to eventually the othermost parts of the earth, similarly, the persecution of the church in the end times within the first half of the tribulation period will have the same effect. It will result in the gospel spreading throughout the rest of the tribulation period. In the Olivet Discourse, Jesus predicted this next effect in Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Additionally, chapter 7 in the book of Revelation, which follows the seal judgments in chapter 6, confirms that a great multitude of people do get saved later in the tribulation period. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, and palms in their hands. These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. There are many paradoxes in Christianity. If you want to be exalted in life, you must first humble yourself. If you want to prosper, you must first give to God, and He will give to you, pressed down and running over. Make no mistake, the Christian response to this persecution of believers in the first half of the tribulation will result in one of the most effectual responses to the Great Commission. But the unsaved world's response to the great persecution of Christianity does not lead to something eternally positive, but rather something that is damning. It results in the great apostasy. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. The word offended in Greek is scandalizo, which means to scandalize, in the sense of placing an impediment in the way of others which trips them up, causing them to distrust and desert what they should be trusted. In moving over to 2 Thessalonians for a cross-reference, now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind or troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there coming a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. The Greek word for falling away is apostasia, from which we get our word apostasy. Apostates in the truest sense are people who fall away from that of which they never truly belonged. The Apostle John said it best when he stated in 1 John chapter 2, verse 19, "They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have no doubt have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest that they were not of us." Apostates are individuals who perhaps were originally in the ranks of Christianity because they liked whom they were with or what they heard initially. However, once the pressure is put on in the form of a fiery trial, they become offended about the things of the Lord and the Word of God, and they depart from Christianity. Seed that is sown in rocky soil sprouts up quickly and withers in the heat of trials. They who have no root or depth in their superficial association with Christianity may even name the name of Christ, but they do not know God and his salvation, and their eventual apostasy is a sure indication of that. As it pertains to the Olivet Discourse, you cannot take out one event within its cause and effect chronology and arbitrarily place that event sometime before or after its natural intended setting. If you do, you remove a cause that leads to the next effect. One example of this type of error, and I cringe when I hear this, is when a believer says that the great persecution of Christians mentioned by Christ in the Olivet Discourse is happening now in places like China and the Middle East. Now, what I'm about to say is not intended to minimize the persecution of believers in China and the Middle East, or for that matter, anywhere in the world today. However, if the great persecution of believers is taken out of when it starts immediately after the beginning of sorrows within the first half of the tribulation period, you do not get the great apostasy that follows. These major prophetic events provided to us by Christ within the 7-year period of the tribulation have to be fulfilled within the rock-solid cause and effect chronology of the Olivet Discourse. Similarly, notice in this text, this falling away, this apostasy happens first before the man of sin, the Antichrist, is revealed. The reason why the great apostasy has to happen first is because without it, you don't get the next effect, which is the Antichrist claiming deity and receiving deity worship. This cause and effect circumstance of the great apostasy occurring first and then the Antichrist being revealed are both identified in 2 Thessalonians as well as in the Olivet Discourse. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. The comment here would be, as mentioned earlier in this online study, although the Antichrist appears as one of many false Christs at the beginning of the tribulation period, he does not gain deity worship until the very near the middle of the tribulation period. This abomination of desolation marks the time and the way that the Antichrist starts to receive that worship. In fact, the proper study of the 70 weeks of Daniel in chapter 9, verse 27, and other insights provided in Daniel in chapter 12, particularly the 1,290 days mentioned there, help us to understand that the setting up of the abomination of desolation occurs exactly 30 days before the precise middle of the tribulation. What exactly is this abomination of desolation, and how does it relate to the Antichrist getting deity worship? The word abomination in the Greek is badelugma, which means a detestable idol. The word desolation in the Greek is aremosis, which means to make desolate. The more literal interpretation of the term abomination of desolation is rendered the abomination that makes desolate. Within the context of Revelation chapter 13, where the Antichrist is in view and is referred to as a beast, we learn of a second beast who is generally referred to as the false prophet. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And those who dwell in it, meaning the earth, worship the first beast. And it's the second beast that performs great signs. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or name of the beast or the number of his name. There's much to be gleaned from this text, but we're only going to focus on 2 insights. First and foremost, understand that this idol image of the Antichrist is the abomination which can both speak and desolate all who do not worship the Antichrist. This is the abomination that makes desolate, and it is set up in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Since the false prophet instructed the world to make this image of the Antichrist and then gave breath or life to the image, it will be a very persuasive temptation for the apostate world then to worship the Antichrist as their God. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 makes mention of this great delusion. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Also, one other insight that we will take time to glean here from the text of Revelation 13 is that he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. I'll try and follow this. Although this idol abomination is set up in one day, precisely 30 days before the middle of the tribulation, assigning this many people with getting the mark of the beast will not be accomplished in one day, which means that until that happens, there is a window of time that many people will have the ability to buy and sell not just food, but do anything else that they need to purchase without restriction. This remaining window of time gives the people of the nation of Israel time to get out and away from this immediate region. In returning to what Jesus reveals next in the Olivet Discourse, Israel is in view in this text that you are seeing right now. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. They have 30 days to make their exodus out of the country of Israel. Notice that the verse starts off with, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation. When they first see it, they got 30 days to get out of Dodge. So once again, they have 30 days to make their exodus out of the country of Israel before the Antichrist breaks his covenant that he has had with the nation of Israel. When the abomination is set up 30 days before the middle of the tribulation, the people of Israel choose not to worship anyone or anything except for who they believe is to be Jehovah God. Also, from Israel's perspective, this idol image of the Antichrist spiritually desecrated their place of worship within their rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. The Jewish people living in Jerusalem and its extended Judea area begin to depart, and it's the start of a major exodus of a great many of Jewish people attempting eventually to leave the entire geography of the country. The information provided thus far in the Olivet Discourse reveals events that will occur during the first 3.5 years in the tribulation period. Our next section will review the information of what the Olivet Discourse reveals for the last 3.5 years in the tribulation period.